Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja
Prabhu, can you lead the verse chanting?
Please, yeah.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Prashantas Charanopadanan
Padmam yadachanti ahirajakanya
Padmam Yadachanti Ahirajanya
Sapremanana Balibirvarata Svadunyadarai Swachita Kalapayar Upasprashantas Charanopadanam
Padmam yadachanti ahirajakanya
Padmam Yadachanti Ahirajakanya
Sapremanana balibirvarata
Sapremanana Balibirvarata Swarnunadarai Swachita Kalapayar Upasprashantas Charanopadanam
Padmam yadachanti ahirajakanya
Padmam Yadachanti Ahirajakanya
Sapremanana balibirvarata
Sapremanana Balibirvarata Prabhus? Swardunyanadrai Swachita Kalapayar Upasprashantas Charanopadanam
Adam Yadachanti Ahirajakanya
Padmam Yadachanti Ahirajakanya
Sapremanana Balibirvarata
Sapremanana Balibirvarata
Sardam Udarai Swajata Kalabhai
Swardunyanadrai Swachita Kalapayar
Upasprashantas Charanopadanam
Upasprashantas Charanopadanam
Padmam Yadachanta Hirajakanyai
Padmam Yadachanti Ahirajakanya
Sapremanana Balibirvarata
Sapremanana Balibirvarata Swarduni Udha
Swadharani Yuddha
by the water of the Ganges
by the water of the Ganges
are dry, being moistened. Swajata, bunch of hairs. Kalapai, situated on the head. Upasprashanta, by so touching. Charana Upadanam, the shelter of his feet. Padmam, the lotus shelter. Jat, that which. Archanti, worships. Ahiraja, the serpent king. Kanya, daughters. Suprema, with great devotion. Nana, various. Balibi, paraphernalia. Vara arta, being desirous of husbands. Translation. The sages. No, I'm sorry. I'm just looking. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the serpent king when they desire good husbands. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges.
through the water of the Ganges.
And therefore the hair on their heads
Therefore the hair on their heads
was wet.
was wet.
They touched the lotus feet of the Lord,
They touched the lotus feet of the Lord,
which are worshipped with various paraphernalia
which are worshipped with various paraphernalia
by the daughters of the Serpent King,
by the daughters of the Serpent King,
when they desire good husbands.
when they desired good husbands.
Purport. The Ganges waters flow directly from the lotus feet of Vishnu, and its course runs from the highest planet of the universe down to the lowest. The sages came down from Satyaloka by taking advantage of the flowing water, a process of transportation made possible by the power of mystic yoga. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in its water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via this sacred river. The statement that their hair was wet indicates that it was directly moistened by the water originating from the lotus feet of Vishnu, the Ganges. Whoever touches the water of the Ganges to his head surely touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly and can become free from all effects of sinful acts. If after taking a bath in the Ganges or being washed of all sins, a man guards himself against committing further sinful acts, then certainly he is delivered. But if he again takes up sinful activities, his bath in the Ganges is as good as that of an elephant, who nicely takes his bath in a river but later spoils the whole thing by covering himself with dust on the land. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the Serpent King, when they desire good husbands. It's a nice prayer I found. I hope you like it. All glories to Sri Guru, the wish-yielding tree of love of Krishna, whose manifestation is so astonishing. With the nice moonbeams of his knowledge, he destroyed the deep darkness of ignorance in my heart. He is the abode of bliss for the eyes. Seeing this fallen soul, he gave me the holy names, which are coveted by everyone, although I did not even ask for them. I am fallen and helpless, and my intelligence is totally corrupt. I do not even have a drop of pious merit. He instructed me in the treasure of the worship of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Krishna and Vrindavan, by showering me with the spotless prem ras, which is given by Lord Gauranga. He fulfilled all my desires. Vaishnav Das weeps. I did not attain loving attachment to the lotus feet of my Guru Dev. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Jnana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Who wrote that?
Vaishnav Das, a Vaishnav of the Middle Ages, just after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, I didn't know who was asking. You're blocked by the pole.
An unembodied voice.
There you are. I thought it was coming from the mask here. So we have various problems on the path. We were speaking about Avaranamika Shakti. We're thrown down from the higher realm and we're covered. And then, here's the situation. When the yogi, or the individual conditioned soul, tries to become a yogi, the demigods place obstacles in their path. And so the path of Atmagyan is sometimes treacherous. So in the morning, yogi goes through the 10 offenses. Of those 10 offenses, 4 give us trouble. What are those 4 offenses that give the typical ISKCON sadhaka a problem? 1, 3, 7, and 10. If you become overly critical of the devotees, you're not going to get a taste for japa mala. If you become like a fault finder, right? When the colander finds fault with the needle. There's one hole in a needle, but the colander has so many holes. So many holes. Used to make bundi for laglu. But there's so many faults in our own heart. So sometimes when I'm advising my inmate students, I tell them, to please culture this mood of finding your own faults, don't find the faults of others. And then you can stay steady on the path. The point is to please Krishna, and here we are in front of the deities. So we don't want to unnecessarily find fault with Vaishnavas. 3, disobeying the orders of the spiritual master. Well, that's a problem. If you know the order of the spiritual master, you should follow it. But we have experience that it's not always that easy. People put down their japa beads. They promised before the fire, before the Vaishnavas, before the deities, and before the Guru to follow these principles and chant 16 rounds a day. But sometimes we become overwhelmed by our only enemy, the mind. And we put down our japa beads. How unfortunate that we've lost the taste in devotional service. And then here, what we're referring to today in this verse is offense number 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting. Sometimes it's not overt, but it's more subtle. And sometimes it's not a problem at all. Typically, devotees aren't thinking that, oh, I'll do this sinful thing and then I'll chant some rounds to make up for it. That's kind of the principle in confession in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church in which I was raised, there's a sacrament, means confession. And we have that same sacrament in our tradition. We're meant to come before the Lord. Sometimes you'll see in the prayers and the nectar of devotion, the devotee approaches the deity and he says, "My Lord, I'm ashamed to stand before you because of my history of sinful activities. Please forgive me." And then he makes his plea for pure devotional service. So in the Catholic tradition, if they still go to confession, some of these things, they don't go on as much as they used to. The setup is you go into the confessional, and the priest is inside, and you're inside, and there's a screen, so he doesn't know exactly who you are. But you go in and say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been so many weeks or months or years since my last confession. And these are my sins." And then you list your sins, if you're honest. If you're not honest, well, I don't know how the sacrament's going to do you any good. But then the priest will absolve you of sins. And he'll say that, well, now you have to chant 3 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys. But then the same thing goes on next month, if people are still doing this. So it's like the elephant taking a bath, and for whatever reason, the elephant likes to get right back in the dust. So if we're on the path of Atmatattva, and we're periodically sinning and confessing and perhaps being absolved, it's a cheating process, and Krishna is more clever than we are. And then the last offense that's a difficult one, what is it, number 10?
Yeah, complete faith.
If you don't have complete faith in the holy names, and there are symptoms to that, and if you maintain material attachments, and that's a big problem. And then if you don't pay attention when you chant, it's like inviting Krishna to your home, and he comes, and you say, just a minute, I'm doing some things here. And so it's not very polite. So I had a few bullet points about this verse. Sometimes when secularists or mundaners or atheists, like Mataji was talking about Sam Harris, he's a new prominent atheist, like some of the others, Richard Dawkins, and so they actively promote the atheistic doctrine, and they mock religion. They like to do that. They like to point out the faults of religionists, whoever they may be, in the Christian tradition, the televangelists, send in your money and Jesus forgives you of your sins. Or they make fun of the fantastic stories in various religious traditions, including the Vedas. I mean, if you look at the Vedas, and eagles dropping elephants from the sky to kill them, and all the fantastic creatures in the Mahabharata and Bhagavatam. And so they'll ridicule these things. Yogis taking bath and appearing in a different place. So they take some type of pleasure in ridiculing these stories. It's they cannot understand things they cannot perceive. So Prabhupada, talking about taking bath in the Ganga, Prabhupada always makes the distinction throughout his books of the various types of austerities. It's like, who's not performing austerities? Because austerities really, in our case, on the path of devotion, means atonement. Even Balaram, he was required to do some atonement. When he took the blade of grass and he touched the insolent Ramaharshan Sutta, and he killed him. But he was the leader of the sages. So the sages said, "Oh, this is very unfortunate. Now we don't have our leader." And Balaram said, "I'll bring him back to life." And he said, "No, what's done is done." But Balaram said, "Well, what atonement should I do?" They said, "Well, there's this demon, Balvala. He's disrupting our sacrifices. So we need him killed." So Balaram said, "Oh yeah," he dispatched him very quickly and went on his pilgrimage. So on the path of sadhana bhakti, mercy is really attained through the process of atonement. Prabhupada said, swacham. Prabhupada was speaking that we have to come to the point of crystal-like clarity in our hearts. Just like the example of the glass, right? It's full of ink. Our hearts are dirty. If you just keep pouring the milk in, eventually it'll be cleansed. Prabhupada said the practical activities or the practical austerities in our process are adequate. Just like I was in Chicago, Prabhupada was speaking. He said that a few days of Sankirtan is worth 60,000 years of Vishwamitra Muni's penances. So the practical activities or the practical austerities in Krishna consciousness, well, for one, we had just a bhakta just leave here, and he shaved his head. And that melts the false ego. And the ladies dress in their saris, and we perform our various activities of, or austerities of rising early, and Krishna says, Jagyanam Japajagyosmi, the very high quality austerity, the highest sacrifice is chanting the holy names. And what is the sacrifice but showing gratitude to Krishna? Only honoring Krishna's prasadam. And there's no retirement. Just like most people, they're aspiring to retire. It's difficult these days because of the situation. But there's no retirement from these practical austerities in Krishna consciousness. This contrition, the devotee approaching Krishna, Jamunacharya, Judavadi Mamachita Krishna Padara Vinde. When I come to approach you, I'm ashamed. When I think of the things that I've done, my lips curl. It's disconcerting. But I'm approaching you. Kindly protect me. So in our chanting, we want to avoid the mentality of engaging in devotional service to counteract foolish activities or sinful activities. Just like in the Catholic tradition, there's this concept of original sin. Have you heard of that? Well, in the Catholic Christian tradition, sometimes the Christians themselves, they don't understand it because they don't all hear it. It's a facet, at least in Catholicism. Mataji, what tradition were you raised in?
A mixture of many things, but Catholicism.
Was that a part of it?
Church, and then she goes to this with millions.
Okay, so part of it was Catholicism. They talk about original sin. And my son-in-law just had a child. Means my daughter had a child. But he was questioning, how can this pure baby be guilty of anything? Be guilty of original sin? Well, he doesn't understand that the baby is not his body. The baby has had many lifetimes, and that there's a spiritual realm. And the story is told in all traditions, including ours. The story of the prodigal son, or the story of the souls descending from Vaikuntha. So the prodigal son story is that there's a wealthy man, a landowner, and his son's being provided very nicely, being provided for very nicely. But the son somehow decides to go to the city and become engaged in all kinds of foolishness. Naturally, there's some suffering involved. But eventually, he returns to the shelter of his father, and he's contrite and seeking forgiveness. So this story is there in every tradition. So the original sin of the living entity was to misuse our independence and want to come to this place. Just like sometimes we're baffled, how can people be so foolish to be living their lives and then do something so stupid and wind up in prison? But we've done the same thing. And in fact, 99.9% of the people are institutionalized prisoners. They like the prison of the material world, and they simply aspire for higher status of prison life. How disconcerting is that? They make no effort to leave the prison. So somehow or other, although it's very rare, Prabhupada's awakened so many people across the planet to extricate yourself from the primary miseries. We know the secondary miseries, the primary miseries: birth, death, old age, and disease. If people are thinking long term, right? Prabhu was talking about the concepts of Shreyas and Preyas. Preyas means short-term benefits. Like if the kid's in high school and he drops out, he's making money while the other students don't have any money. But the other students go on for higher education. The other guy's still making minimum wage, and they go on for making a good living because of their education. So what about beyond this life? People are fixed in the concept that I am this body, so they don't make preparations beyond this, what Prabhupada calls a spot life. So it's a practical process with practical austerities, and Krishna's Bhavagrahi Janardana, or Bhavagrahi Govinda. Krishna's appreciative of the sentiment that one is struggling for him. Right? We said yesterday, what's the definition of a hero from the Bhagavatam? One who continues to struggle for Krishna. So as we struggle and try to eliminate our offenses in chanting, Krishna's appreciative of the effort. And it doesn't take the austerities of the Ashtangis or the yogis. It just takes maybe coming to Mangal Arti on time and chanting strong japa and being fixed. And Prabhupada said, your austerity in this age is to work together cooperatively. So that we can try to do. And Prabhupada said with intelligence and organization we can push on the movement. We can take example from the elephant, not to throw dirt all over our bodies, not to dirty our hearts once again, because gradually, Shanai, Shanai, they become cleaner with every holy name chanted. Anybody have any questions or comments?
You know, even in the prison, like you were mentioning, of course this world is a prison, but the people that are in prison in, say, this country, those that are sort of like lifers, they reach a certain point where they just can't even consider life outside the prison because they've already got that, and it's just not going to work out for them because they know that they'll have this, like, always, even though they say, no, you've paid your debt, society treats them differently. And if you've gone in there in the 70s and you come out now, there's all these internet things, and you don't know what's going on. And they themselves, as a perverted reflection, they themselves would rather stay in prison than come out.
Yeah, well, that's all of us. We're all institutionalized prisoners until we get a taste for Nam-bhajan. And then at that point, we're really moving forward. Because there's levels, Adav, Shraddha, Tata Sadhu, Sangata, Bhajana, Kriya. First there's faith, there's Sadhu Sangha, there's cultivation of hearing, acting on hearing. You become fixed, develop the Param Drishtva for Japamala. If you like Kirtan and you don't have any taste for Japa, you just like music. So you have to like Nam Bhajan, these holy names. And until we come to that point of spontaneous attraction for Krishna, Kali Kali Nam Rupe Krishna avatar, for his avatar in this age, Nam Rupa. We're the institutionalized prisoners. We kind of like it here. We're kind of comfortable. But comfort and self-realization don't go well together. So we should take up the simple and sublime, effective and scientific austerities of sadhana bhakti. Prabhupada said, without worship of the deities, you cannot understand the Gita. That's from a Vedic aphorism in the 11th canto purport. So Prabhupada's provided, isn't it beautiful? Archana, Vigraha, how fortunate we are. I mean, Indians around the planet, when they see our standard of worship, whether in India or America or anywhere else, they comment it's the highest. It's the highest type of worship they've seen. So I'm receiving inspiration from the pujaris, from the devotees. I'm receiving inspiration from the kirtaniyas and cooks. And that's why I like this movement, because I like to be around these wonderful devotees. It's a beautiful spiritual family, and it's expanding all over the world. Everywhere I go in India, oh my gosh. Prabhupada's really got things going on. There's one man in Mayapur in 74 used to come to the kirtan, some older Indian gentleman, and he would jump up and down and say, "Whole world sunshine, Prabhupada, whole world sunshine." So it's a blissful process, Vishwapurna. Sukhayate, let the whole world be happy by chanting the holy names, right? Arjun says the whole world becomes happy by chanting your holy names. You can see that online. It's really quite beautiful. Kirtans in Israel, Ukraine, India, wherever you go, it's spreading, even prison villages. Prabhupada has a lot of things going on in prison villages. There's 5,000 men or women in these various villages. And I find that some of my prisoners are very mature. They've been in prison many years, and parole's coming up. That means they have a chance to get out. But they say, "I don't care what happens. Whatever Krishna decides, I'll be fine with." Now imagine that. You're living in a 6 by 9 foot cell, sometimes 23 hours a day. That's not uncommon. That's all year long. That's solitary confinement, and it's routine these days. So there's gradations of prisons, heavenly planets, middle, hellish planets, this body, a lower body. In prison one time I went to a prison in Florida, and I parked the car and I started walking, and I saw my friend, the prisoner. I said, "What's going on?" I thought he was busting out or something. It's the Great Escape. I said, "I'm not getting involved in any of this." And I said, "I thought, what?" And he goes, "See that line there?" He said, "I can't cross that line." So it was prison light, I guess you could say. So gradations of prisons, right? Heavenly bodies.
But he was allowed to go outside.
He was allowed to go outside. It was like a college campus.
That's better.
It was on an Air Force base.
Uh,
So at any rate, but there are other prisons where the conditions are very severe. It would be very difficult for any of you to tolerate. It's so restrictive. So I'm very proud of the character Prabhupada develops in these men, and sometimes the ladies, when they don't care what happens to them. It's very inspiring. Oh, there's one nice letter. This is just one letter. I get letters like this almost every day. And there's a book of letters here on the shelf Chandramali Swami has produced. Inspiring letters from prisoners that Prabhupada's created. And they're performing such nice austerities in prison. Just for self-realization. And sometimes at the threat of their lives. Because when they leave a prison gang, then you'll be killed. And so that happens sometimes, that they leave the gangs without any fear, let Krishna do as he likes. Anyways, this is from Bhakta Henry Sanchez. And he says, Hare Krishna, I want to thank you so very much for the books and flyers you sent me. I was so happy to receive them. I've been reading and studying so that I may practice Krishna consciousness correctly. The book you sent me previously has been a very great help and experience. I am learning so much. It says, you are a wonderful blessing. Lord Krishna surely has sent you to help me on my journey back to Godhead. I will never forget you guys. I hope to stay in contact with you when I go home to share with you my progress. I have taken this practice very seriously. As a matter of fact, I have recently become a vegetarian. It's hard here because we don't get much to eat as it is, especially anything nutritious. But I'm devoted, so it doesn't matter. One thing I wanted to be sure to tell you is that it is people like you that make a difference in the world. I pray that Lord Krishna blesses you greatly. I'm studying every day and I've made a lot of headway. And I have to thank you for it as well as Lord Krishna. Thank you for all you've done for me. You're a major factor in my life changing for the better. Almost every day I get letters like that. And you can read more. They're called Forbidden Voices right here.
I have your newsletter. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. So Prabhupada performed his own austerities when he came to this country. Remember in the beginning? So he had a sponsor in Butler, Pennsylvania, we know about. But what about New York City? He left Butler, through Philly, he went to the Port Authority in New York and was met by a student of Dr. Mishra. And so he was taken to the west side on 72nd, and he had a small, what was like a janitor's closet. It was a very small space he had to live in. And he had a few followers because he had some meetings. But then they said, well, everything's happening downtown. It's very funny, the dichotomy in New York, on Manhattan, the uptowners and the downtowners. Sometimes the people that live uptown, they think to go downtown, that's like a major pilgrimage, major event to go down to the Lower East Side, somewhere around there. So, but Prabhupada heard that there were youth there looking for something higher on the spiritual path. And so he left the upper east side, or the west side, the upper west side, where it's kind of comfortable comparatively. It's near Central Park. And he went to the lower east side. He actually went to the Bowery first because, imagine, at the time, I was living in the Midwest and the Bowery had a bad name and I was a kid. So certainly others knew about the awful place that was the Bowery at the time Prabhupada went there. So Prabhupada went to an AIR, Artist in Residence loft, where he was living for a while. And he was attracting a following. But Mr. David went crazy on LSD, and he threatened Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was chased out of there. He left everything and just took off. And somehow or other he was saved by Krishna and some of his followers at the time. And then he went to another ARA, but the Carl Jurgens, who was a nice guy, African-American guy, he welcomed him, but his wife did not like him because she was a feminist. And Prabhupada had already been speaking about the position of women even before 26 Second Avenue. She did not like his views. So there was tension in the loft. And so all of a sudden, Prabhupada had to find another place, and I think it was Mukunda who found the ad in a Village Voice for the storefront on 26 Second Avenue. It was very nice. It's nice to reflect on Prabhupada's austerities, all he did first. When he was chased out of the loft by the crazy boy, he had free steam ship passage back to India at that point. All he had to do was go from there to the Scindia office and leave. We're very fortunate he did not.
I read, when, was it, I think it was 2016, was that the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of this conversation?
66.
So it would be 50.
16, 2016.
Yeah, so Satguru Maharaj,
Yeah.
they had him writing a daily, like what happened to Prabhupada on, say, July 7th, 1966. And so when that bus trip you said, with the students from Dr. Mishra picked him up,
Yeah.
that there was a program that evening on the west side, and it was all expats, in other words, specifically from Calcutta, Bengal.
Yeah, it was an Indian
And
festival.
they were very successful people.
Ah.
And their entertainment was this very, very famous Indian dancer and Ravi Shankar.
Yeah, Ravi Shankar
And
was
the
it.
first night, he had a chance to connect with these people that he was a very successful businessman. He felt very comfortable with them on a certain level. But they were not the people he wanted to preach to. But he could have carved out a very comfortable approach to spreading what Chaitanya movement and fulfilling Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's instruction. But he realized to do that would require some compromising, and he decided to take a different path.
Like a spiritual master.
Oh, yes?
Do you know
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Was asking about the confession.
Yes.
And you also mentioned about the rituals, they're asking for money in return for that fish.
Yes.
So do they do some kind of ritual or something?
No, there's no ritual. Just send the check.
Okay.
And you'll be saved in the blood of Jesus. And, this is why many intellectuals are turned off by this cheating type of religion. The Bhagavatam rejects it first thing. And it's something we criticize. So we criticize the cheating so-called religionists. And, these intellectuals and atheists, they mock this type of bogus religion. They can't discern. Krishna speaks about it. They don't know what is religion, what is irreligion. They can't tell. They don't know. What is dharma? What is spirituality? They can't discern. They don't have a proper definition. So it's something we also criticize. But we lift people up to the platform of dharma, of real religion. Connecting. Religion, yoga, spirituality, dharma, they're all synonyms for connecting with Krishna. So, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, they paid their prostrate respects to Lord Chaitanya with straw in their mouth. And Lord Chaitanya was so touched by this act of devotion and submission and humility that he said, "Stop, you're breaking my heart. Please get up." So aham bhakta pauradino hyasva tantra ivadvija. Sodabir grasta hridiyo bhaktir bhakta janapriya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahiyanya. Here's Sri Krishna Chaitanya. He's Radha and Krishna. He's the Supreme Independent Lord. Radha Kanta are here, the divine couple. They're independent, but they have no independence whatsoever when it comes to their pure devotees. Krishna says, aham bhakti paradino, hyasva tantra ivadvija, that I become controlled by the love of my devotees, like Mother Jashoda chasing Damodar around with a stick. So it's very nice. Through these practical austerities, Krishna, he becomes appreciative of the sentiment of seva. So, yeah. With that, Mahapatita Pavanadev, Srila Prabhupada ki
Yeah.
Jaya.